I was hired for the night shift at the Willow Creek plant because the pay was decent and the work was simple. Walk the perimeter, log the doors, make sure the generators stayed on, and report any anomalies. The building had been dormant for 12 years, an old textile mill that had burned out its machinery, left empty, and eventually sealed off. By the time I arrived, the paint on the walls had peeled like old skin, and the air smelled of rust and stale wool. The first night was a test of routine. I arrived at 9 p.m., the sky a thin bruise of clouds over the horizon. I took the key from the narrow metal box by the gate, the same rusted box that had sat there since before the mill closed. The lock gave a gritty squeak as I turned it. Nothing more than a sound I could have expected from any old building. Inside, the hallways stretched in dim, linear lines, illuminated only by the occasional flickering fluorescent tube. The lights were on a timer, cycling every 30 minutes, as if the building were trying to keep a pulse. I logged the temperature on my handheld device, 58 degrees Fahrenheit, a constant that never seemed to change. The generators hummed low in the basement, a steady thrum that settled into the bones of the night. My first round was a simple walk. The concrete floor was slick with dust, the occasional piece of broken glass catching the occasional burst of light. I checked each door, noting the status on my clipboard. Locked. Okay. The main entrance was always locked. The side doors were bolted. The control room, with its glass pane and a bank of dead monitors, looked like a relic from another era. I flicked the switch on the central console. The screen blinked to life, displaying only a static gray, a reminder that the plant's systems had been offline for years. I settled into the desk, the chair creaking as I shifted my weight. The only sounds were the distant hum of the generators, the occasional drip of water somewhere deep in the building, and the rustle of wind against the cracked windows. My watch ticked, each second a small, measured percussion. Hours slipped by in a rhythm almost too precise. I would stand, stretch, glance at the hallway, and return to the desk. I logged each hour with the same methodical hand, my pen moving in the same smooth strokes. The silence was comforting in its predictability. The darkness outside the windows seemed to press against the glass, but the interior was a world of its own, a sealed, unchanging bubble. On the third night, I began to notice the little things that didn't quite line up. The hallway clock above the main door, a cheap analog piece that had never run, had a minute hand that seemed to linger a fraction longer on the 12 than on any other number. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, a reflection from the hallway's fluorescent tubes. Yet the next night, the clock's hands were a shade different. The hour hand had shifted from pointing at 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., even though I had logged the time correctly on my chart. I double-checked the battery, the loose screws, but found nothing. I started to listen for the subtle changes in the building's sounds. The generators, which had been a low, steady growl, now gave off a faint chime every hour, a high-pitched note that rose like a sigh and faded into the night. I couldn't trace its source. It seemed to emanate from the same place each time, a corner of the control room where the wall panel was cracked, exposing a hollow behind it. I lifted the cover, found only insulation and the echo of my own breath. The most unsettling thing, though, was the pattern of the doors. On my first shift, I recorded every door as locked. On the fourth night, one side door, the one that led to the loading dock, was ajar, a narrow gap letting the cold night air seep in. I closed it and latched it, noting the discrepancy. The next night, it was shut again. By the seventh night, another door, the office on the third floor, was slightly opened, as if someone had nudged it in the dark. I closed it, left a note on the log, and went back to the desk. I whispered to myself, "Just an old hinge, maybe. Just a draft." My routines became a tether. I timed my coffee breaks precisely at 2:15 a.m., when the generators emitted a low whine that seemed to sync with the rhythm of my heartbeat. I would step out onto the balcony, lean against the rusted railing, and watch the fog roll in over the river that ran past the plant's outer fence. The fog was a thick, white sheet that moved like a slow tide, swallowing the lights of the distant town. It felt like the world outside was a different place entirely, one that could not touch the cold interior of the mill. On the 10th night, I found a small notebook tucked behind a loose brick in the hallway near the break room. Its pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but the entries were recent, dates that matched my shifts, written in a hand that was not mine. 12:05 a.m. The lights flickered again. He's watching. The next line read, 13 a.m. The clock's minute hand lingered on 12. It feels wrong. I stared at the page, heart rate rising despite the stillness. I wondered if the previous guard, if anyone had kept a log, had felt the same drift, the same slow tilt of normalcy into something off-kilter. I placed the notebook back where I had found it, feeling the weight of an unseen gaze. The building never made a sound that could be called a voice, but the ambient hum seemed to deepen, as if the walls themselves were listening. When the shift finally ended at 6 a.m., the sky was a thin strip of gray, the fog thinning, revealing the rust-colored silhouette of the plant against the waking world. I turned the key in the gate, the same gritty squeak, and walked out onto the cracked pavement. The air smelled fresh for the first time in weeks, a sharp contrast to the stale interior. I glanced back at the building one last time, noticing that the front door, which had always been locked, was slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness spilling out onto the yard. I drove away without looking back, the road stretching ahead in a quiet dawn. The truck's radio crackled with static, a distant song playing faintly. I thought of the notebook, the lingering hands of the clock, the doors that opened on their own. The plant receded behind me, a monolith shrouded in mist, its secrets staying within its walls. Now, months later, I still keep the watchful habit of noting every small irregularity, every lingering second, each door that doesn't stay where I left it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, I hear the low chime of the generators in the distance, a reminder that some routines never truly end. The night shift is over, but the feeling of being watched, of something just a fraction out of place, remains, tucked into the edges of memory, quiet as the hum of an old machine that never truly stops. Story 2. I took the job at the Cross Creek Motel because it was steady, quiet, and paid just enough. The highway it sat on had been bypassed years ago by the new interstate, and now only trucks hauling grain, the occasional delivery van, and people who'd missed their exit ever rolled past. Most nights, I saw 2 or 3 cars in the 10-hour shift, sometimes none at all. The silence didn't bother me. I'd spent years in cities, in crowds, in noise that never slept. This was different. This was clean. At least, that's what I thought. The office smelled of stale coffee, mildewed carpet, and the faint chemical tang of the air freshener they plugged into the wall each month. A ceiling fan turned slowly above, stirring warm air that never quite circulated. The neon vacancy sign buzzed low and constant, like a wasp trapped behind glass. My shift ran from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. I'd arrive just as the last local diner closed, park beneath the flickering street lamp out front, and step inside the office where the air was always a little heavier than outside. For the first few weeks, everything was routine. I'd check on the couple of long-term guests, mostly older men with nowhere else to go, their rooms paid weekly. I'd restock the vending machine, wipe down the counter, and sip lukewarm coffee while watching the black rectangle of the parking lot through the glass. Sometimes I'd read. Sometimes I'd just sit, letting my thoughts unravel into nothing. The quiet became a presence, almost companionable. Then, the first thing happened. It was around 2 in the morning. I looked up from a paperback and noticed the back door, the one leading to the old boiler room, was open a crack. Not wide, just enough to see the dark sliver of the narrow passage beyond, and to feel the cooler air leaking through. I remembered locking it earlier. I was sure of it, but maybe I hadn't. I closed it, checked the deadbolt, and made a note on the logbook. Back door found ajar, secured at 2:17. The next night it happened again. Same time, same crack in the door. I didn't think too much of it. Maybe the latch was faulty, or the frame warped with the seasons. I tightened the bolt, jiggled the handle. Solid. But still, when I checked 2 hours later, the door was open again. Not swinging. Not broken into. Just ajar. I started checking it hourly, and each time I'd find it closed. Except at 2:15, almost exactly, when I'd glance over and see that thin cut of darkness peeking through. Then the phone rang. It was an old rotary model, disconnected years ago. The motel used a mobile line now, routed to a phone on the desk. But one night, just past 2, the rotary phone rang. A single ring. I froze. Looked at it. The handset sat coiled and still. I picked it up. Silence. I hung it up. Nothing. No dial tone. No signal. Just plastic and dust. I told myself it was a short in the wiring. Some old current arcing across broken contacts. But the next night, it happened again. One ring. Precisely at 2:14. And again the night after. No one ever called. No one came in. The parking lot stayed empty. The rooms quiet. But I began to dread that hour. I'd find myself staring at the phone, willing the silence to hold. And when the ring came, always one, never more, I'd flinch, just slightly. The weight in the room would deepen, like the air had thickened. Then, one night, I saw her. She stood at the far end of the lot, near the back row of rooms, Unit 12, maybe 13. Just a figure in a pale dress, her back to me, motionless. I watched, waiting for her to turn, to walk toward the office. But she didn't. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped outside. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The air was cool, damp with coming dawn. I swept the beam across the lot. Empty. I checked Unit 12. No car. Door locked. Room hadn't been rented in months. I went back inside. The phone rang. One ring. I didn't answer. After that, I started noticing other things. The register logbook had entries I didn't write. Neat, slanted handwriting in blue ink. Guest checked in. Room 9. Paid in cash. But no one had come in. I'd been awake. I'd have seen them. I flipped back through previous pages. Same handwriting. Names I didn't recognize. Payments recorded at 2:13 a.m. I stopped sleeping during the day. The apartment above the office, meant for managers, was empty. But I'd hear footsteps at night. Slow. Deliberate. Passing my door. Stopping. Then retreating. I checked the lock every evening. Always fastened. Last night, I did something I hadn't done before. I left the office, walked the perimeter with the flashlight. I counted the rooms, checked each door. All locked, all dark. When I returned, the back door was open again. Not ajar, wide open. And inside, on the floor just past the threshold, was a single key. Room 7. I picked it up. Cold. Worn. The metal was dark, almost tarnished. I don't know why, but I walked down to room 7. I'd never seen anyone in it. The last guest left 2 years ago, I was told. I unlocked it. The room was empty. Made-up bed. Dusty nightstand. But on the pillow, folded neatly, was a towel with the motel's faded logo. It was damp. I left it there. I came back to the office. The phone rang. One ring. I didn't look at it. Now it's almost 2:15 again. The fan turns. The vacancy sign hums. I'm writing this down because I feel, no, I know, something is waiting. Not for me to leave, but for me to stay. And I think, soon, I will.